Testing. 1, 2, 3. Hello. Yo. What is going on? It is a new season of NFL football. That's right. We got kickoff in about 20 minutes. The Baltimore Ravens are taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. Should be a pretty exciting game to kick this season off. I'm pretty pumped. And then tomorrow night, we've got the Green Bay Packers playing against the Philadelphia Eagles in Sao Paulo, Brazil, an international game to kick things off in South America, of all places. Pretty awesome. Wanted to get some of my season predictions. As well as I guess Super Bowl and playoff predictions since I never really got to it this season. And no better time than kickoff right before the season, right before everything really starts to count. But should be a pretty exciting season. NFL teams have really ramped up, and kickoff is among us. So NFL predictions 24 season, picks for MVP, offensive, defensive rookie of the year, Super Bowl, all that fun stuff. Going with MVP to start. Mahomes is probably the favorite. I also like CJ Stroud a lot and Jalen Hurts. So expect those three guys in the race throughout the season. But it's also nice to sometimes get not a non-quarterback in that race. So if I had to choose, CMC, Saquon could really have a huge impact on the Eagles. CD Lamb just got paid with Dallas. He could maybe have an MVP season. Tyreek Hill also was in that conversation last year. So, but MVP still usually goes to a quarterback. Mahomes is clearly the favorite. The Chiefs are trying to go for that three-peat, so we'll see how things go. Josh Allen's typically in that conversation on an annual basis as well. But I really like what the Texans have been doing on their offense, getting weapons all around CJ Stroud. They added Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon to that offense. So imagine CJ Stroud already was doing really well with Tank Dell and Nico Collins. Just add another couple pieces. This is also the second year for D'Amico Ryans, the head coach, who I'll probably get to when I talk about Coach of the Year. But MVP odds, let me know who you guys like in the comments or whatever. But I personally am gonna be biased and go with the Eagles. Jalen Hurts would be a fun pick, but I think C.J. Stroud is really gonna be the unexpected MVP. But let me know what you guys think. It'd be awesome to see if the Texans really take it to that next level this year. Going to Offensive Player of the Year, moving on to those other offensive guys, since quarterbacks typically win the MVP. Offensive Player of the Year usually goes to the skill positions like running backs and wide receivers. Tyreek Hill is always up in that conversation. Bijan Robinson, Jamar Chase, AJ Brown, Christian McCaffrey, CD Lamb, like I mentioned earlier. So a lot of guys, maybe even Garrett Wilson. He could have an explosive year with Aaron Rodgers. He's had really good seasons in the past with pretty bad quarterbacks, so it'd be pretty interesting to see how he does. But it looks like Tyreek Hill is the betting favorite, along with Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson could be really explosive. They have a new offensive coordinator and they have Kirk Cousins, so it could be pretty exciting to see him maybe be unleashed and get 20-30 carries a game, and even get involved in the pass game. We've really seen how special he is even just his rookie year. So hopefully Big Kirko, or even Michael Penix, the quarterback they drafted in the first round, if he plays at all this year, they can unleash him. But running backs don't always need a quarterback to really help them. But as far as that, I want to go with Jamar Chase. I think he's really trying to bet on himself and get this money. He still was waiting for that contract. He wants to be the highest paid or wide receiver in the league. So it'd be pretty cool to see if he gets just as much or, $1 more than Justin Jefferson, his former teammate at LSU. So I'm going to put my money on Jamar Chase. Well, I'm not actually putting any money, but I'd put money on Jamar Chase for Offensive Player of the Year. I think he can have 1,200 yards and 9+ touchdowns with Joe Burrow. Really love that Bengals offense. Defensive Player of the Year, let's see. Micah Parsons is the clear favorite right now, but TJ Watt, Max Crosby, Myles Garrett, Aiden Hutchinson, Sauce Gardner are all in the conversation. I really like Aiden Hutchinson's development in the Detroit defense. I think that it's typically going to go to a pass rusher, so unfortunately I don't think it's going to go to Sauce Gardner or any corner or safety. But I could be wrong. Troy Polamalu, I'm pretty sure, has won the award in the past, and other defensive players as well. But I want to put my kudos on Aiden Hutchinson. I think he's the fun pick. But I also really like the development of Jalen Carter on the Eagles. He was runner-up for Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year last year. I don't think he's going to be in this conversation, but honorable mention as a Eagles fan. So we'll see. But Offensive Rookie of the Year, Caleb Williams is the clear favorite, the quarterback for the Chicago Bears. We'll see how he does. He's got a plethora of options with Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and now newly drafted Rome Odunze, who I really like. So they are all in that conversation Caleb Williams is definitely in the conversation for Rookie of the Year, the number one pick in this year's draft. Marvin Harrison also, Marvin Harrison Jr., don't get confused with his dad, the Hall of Famer, is also definitely in the conversation for Rookie of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year. Considering he was just an elite talent at Ohio State, and that was standing on a field with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, who are two of the best wide receivers in the NFL the past few years as well. So I think that he will join them in those ranks very quickly and get over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns in his rookie season with Kyler Murray. So I think he's very much in that conversation. Some honorable mentions: Jaden Daniels, the former Heisman winner, who is the quarterback for the Washington Commanders. I unfortunately just don't think that they have enough weapons around him, especially after trading Jahan Dotson. I like Brock Bowers a lot, also the tight end that Oakland drafted from Georgia, but I don't think that he's really going to do enough. But at the same time, he was really used in a plethora of ways at Georgia. He was sometimes in the run game, blocking and catching. So maybe the Oakland gets a little creative with him. We'll see. Malik Neighbors is also the best wide receiver that the Giants have had since OBJ. Will definitely make Daniel Jones look much better this year. And then honorable mention, my favorite quarterback in this year's class is Bo Nix. I think that him and Sean Payton can be a beautiful marriage in Denver. I'm really excited to see his development, especially with the wide receivers that they have. They already have his rookie wide receiver, Troy Franklin from Oregon, who he played with. And then Cortland Sutton seems to be a nice connection for him there. As far as Defensive Rookie of the Year, I like Laitu Latu, the defensive end that the Colts drafted. He was the first defensive player and edge rusher in this draft. I think he's really shown up to his pedigree so far in the preseason. Looked real good, shown a variety of different moves. It's just a matter of how good the Colts can really be and how good can that defense overall be, and the help around him at D-tackle. But some other honorable mentions are Chop Robinson, Jared Verse, and then some of the cornerbacks. I just don't think that the cornerbacks are really going to get those stats. And then comeback player of the year, fun award. Joe Burrow's definitely in the conversation. Aaron Rodgers, who only played 4 plays last year. Big Kirko, and Anthony Richardson, who only played a couple games as a rookie. I can't really say Kyler Murray or Nick Chubb just because they still played a little bit last year. And even though they may have some incredible seasons, I don't think that they will have quite the type of comebacks as those other players like Rodgers, Cousins, or Big Kirko, or my guy Joe Burr. But we'll see. Coach of the year, I really like D'Amico Ryans to get it this year, coach of the Houston Texans. But honorable mention to Jim Harbaugh. They always like to give it to rookie head coaches, although he's not really a rookie head coach since he's returning. So Raheem Morris and OJ Mayo might be honorable mentions as well. But moving on to some playoff predictions and division ranks. As far as the NFC or the AFC East, I personally like the Dolphins to win it this year. I think that they've got the best team. I really like Mike McDaniel and that offense. Really love how fast they move. Tua with just so many guys that run 4.4s or faster, with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill on the outside, and now they add OBJ, who's still coming off IR for about a couple weeks, but they get Malik Washington in the draft, who I really like, kid out of Virginia, pretty late, so watch him. He might be worth a late fantasy snag or a waiver wire pick later once he really starts to prove himself. Same thing with their running back, Jalen Warren. Really like him, running back out of Tennessee. Real similar to Alvin Kamara. Hopefully he can get some touches in that offense, although it's a pretty crowded backfield considering they have Raheem Morris and Devin Achine. But moving on to the Bills, who I think will probably follow up and be the second place team. Really like the Bills, but their offense and offensive wide receiver core definitely took a step back this year, trading away Stephon Diggs and losing Gabe Davis into free agency. They did get Keon Coleman in the draft, and Curtis Samuel, so some targets will be recouped there, but I don't think it's enough to dethrone what I think the Dolphins will win this champ. And the Jets are an honorable mention. Maybe Rodgers and that offense really get cooking, and they've got a pretty talented defense, but it's really just a matter of if they can play healthy. And the Jets really just have to prove it to me. Moving on to the AFC North, I like the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow and that offense will be cooking this year. I really like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and they drafted a nice wide receiver to complement them. Not to mention, I think that Chase Brown, their second-year running back, he only got like touches in like 3 games last year. Could really take over that backfield. Joe Mixon was not too efficient despite finishing as like the RB5 in fantasy football last year. I've been talking and I'm thirsty. But Joe Mixon wasn't as efficient as the fantasy football stats may show. But I really like Chase Brown and that Zach Moss two-headed backfield, thunder and ice. And that Cincinnati Bengals offense. It's really a matter of if that defense can hold up, because I don't really know enough about them to warrant if they can, keep offenses to less than 25 points. Moving on to the Ravens, though, who I think are definitely going to be extremely competitive. Really like Lamar Jackson, the MVP of last year. The They lose actually three offensive linemen, so I think that that's going to be a pretty big detriment to their run game. But they do add Derrick Henry, who's a bulldozer. He is definitely getting a little older, but I like the development of Zay Flowers. But again, they also lose OBJ, who's still coming off an injury. But I just and they also lose Patrick Queen to the Steelers on defense. So I think because the Ravens lost a couple of guys, that they're just going to take a little bit of a step back to the Bengals. But this is going to be what. That was not English. This is probably going to be one of the more competitive divisions in football this year. The AFC North definitely has four teams that are going to be pretty nice and competitive. Even the Bengals are. Even the Browns and Steelers are going to be pretty nice. I really have no idea what to expect of the Steelers. They've got a great defense with T.J. Watt, but I still don't know how long Russell Wilson's really going to start at quarterback. I have a feeling Justin Fields is going to take over mid-season or at some point this season. But either way, I really like the development of George Pickens this year. I think that this is going to be George Pickens' season. He's really going to develop, mainly because they just don't have that much wide receiver depth for the Steelers. And then just talking about the Browns, I actually really like the wide receiver depth that they have. They traded for Jerry Jeudy. They have Elijah Moore, and they have Amari Cooper, David Njoku. I'm pretty sure their running back is Nick Chubb is hurt right now, but Ford can definitely get things done, and it's really just a matter of how well Deshaun Watson can do. He's shown some flashes in Cleveland, but really has to remain on the field to unlock that Browns offense. But that defense is pretty great and hopefully can hold up. But gonna be a competitive division, but again, I like the Bengals. Moving on to the AFC South, I think that the Texans are going to win this division. I don't even think it's going to be that close of a race. I really like the additions that they have, adding Stephon Diggs, even if it's just a 1 or 2 year rental. I think it's going to be pretty awesome having all those wide receivers for a young quarterback in C.J. Stroud. At Ohio State, he had Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Marvin Harrison Jr. And now in the NFL, he has Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell. Not to mention, now he adds Joe Mixon in the run game. They already had Damian Pierce, which was pretty nice. And, D'Amico Ryans, the year 2 head coach, should be pretty nice. They also have a decent defense with Will Anderson developing in year 2 to compete with the Texans in the AFC South. Maybe is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll see. Trevor Lawrence definitely added some pieces. I really like Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie wide receiver that they added from LSU. Is just a big play, deep play threat all the time. Worthy or Singletary, Robinson or Shakir. For fantasy, I like Shakir a lot, but I also like Brian Robinson this year. I would choose Brian Robinson of those 3, Worthy, Singletary, and Robinson. But Khalil Shakir could be the number 1 in Buffalo this year. Pretty interesting to see what might happen there, considering they have unproven Keon Coleman in their wide receivers, but they also do have Khalil Shakir, who you just mentioned, and Dalton Kincaid, who's might be that number 1 wide receiver this year. I like Devontae Smith a lot this year. I think he's elite. But at the same time, the Eagles are going to have a lot of targets and a lot of mouths to feed. Dude, I'm answering all your questions, or I guess all of them. Javonte Williams or Coleman at flex. At least week 1, I would go with Javonte Williams just because Coleman isn't proven yet. But give Coleman maybe a week or 2, and then if Josh Allen scores a touchdown or targets him 5+ times a game, then I'd say give him the green light and maybe get him in your flex or even your wide receiver 2 or 3, depending on how deep your leagues are. But moving on to the AFC West, and this is a pretty easy choice. I think the Chiefs are going to win this division. The 2-time Super Bowl champs are going for that three-peat. Pat Mahomes, the Super Bowl MVP and multi MVP, I'm pretty sure he's won it a couple times, has a young wide receiver core, all new with Xavier Worthy, who they just drafted, really fast guy, fastest 40 in NFL draft history with a 4.19, beating / tying the unofficial Deion Sanders time. But the Chiefs should do very well and get deep in the playoffs. Thoughts on the Vikings? I'll get to them in just a minute, since I am moving on to the NFC now. So we can start with the Vikings, or the NFC North. I like the Lions to start with the NFC North a lot. They looked really good at the end of last season. I really like Dan Campbell's team. Jared Goff is really cooking, and I think Jamison Williams, their wide receiver from Alabama a couple years ago, is really going to develop into a nice number 2 alongside Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are an awesome combo in that run game. So I really think that they're going to develop and potentially go very deep in this year's playoffs. The Green Bay Packers are also really interesting, since Jordan Love really ended the season on a high note. They got a really nice young wide receiver corps with Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, Dontavion Wicks, all these young guys, and even Bo Melton, a guy I like. But they can really spread the ball out. Moving on to the question on the Vikings, like Crime, I guess is his name, asked. The Vikings have been bit with the injury bug, unfortunately. I think Justin Jefferson's still going to cook. I really like Jordan Addison, despite him getting the DUI this summer, I guess. But I don't know if Dalton's really going to be that great. I'm not the biggest fan of his, but we'll see. Or not Dalton. What's his name? Sam Darnold. Close. But also, speaking of the Bears, I really like what they've done for Caleb Williams, setting him up for success with all those wide receivers year one. They already had a pretty nice defense. I really feel bad for Justin Fields because he couldn't get any of this help while he was in Chicago. I mean, I guess they slowly put together some of those pieces, but not to this level. Caleb Williams will probably break a lot of Bears records, or Bears quarterback records year one. But that's mostly just because if you look at the Bears quarterback history, it's not that great or prestigious. I think they only have one quarterback with 4,000 yards or more. So I think Caleb Williams might be able to do that in year one with these wide receivers, and I'm excited to see what they can do. But again, I still like the Lions to win the NFC North. The NFC South, I think that the Falcons are going to take it this year. The add of Big Kirko can really unleash that offense. The past few years, they've really had quarterback problems, having to start the Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder, who are not necessarily NFL starting quarterback caliber. So having Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix is a huge improvement for the Falcons, not to mention that they already have dynamic offensive playmakers in Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts. They've really heavily invested in their first round picks in that offense, and it seems to be paying off. And then in free agency, they actually built their defense pretty well, along with a couple trades, and it really seems like they are on the right target. And then to compete with them, I also like the Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield's been it seems like he found a home in Tampa, signs a 3-year contract there, had an awesome connection with Mike Evans last season, so hopefully he can keep that train, I guess, choo-chooing. But we'll see how that offense does. I think their defense took a step back. They lose Devin White in the middle of their linebacker core, but they still have some nice pieces. But the New Orleans Saints, unfortunately, I think are going to be taking a step back. I just don't really like what Derek Carr is going to be doing. But to combat that, I really do like Spencer Rattler to be a surprise quarterback mid-season. I think he might take over. But I really like Chris Olave for fantasy purposes. Team rate: quarterback Jalen, running back Bijan, White, wide receivers Puka, Zay. I mean, that's a pretty nice That's a pretty nice team. Panda Bloom. Hey, I like Panda Bloom. That's a cool name. But I really like Jalen in fantasy. He gets those rushing touchdowns. Bijan was definitely your first round pick, and it's nice that you invested in the running back position. And it's pretty awesome that you probably got Puka with the second, and then Jalen. I'm already choosing this. Not crazy about DJ Moore, especially with the competing with those other targets with Odunze and Allen. But we'll see. He's definitely been in that offense the longest, but I don't think that really means much with a new quarterback in Caleb Williams. Water. It's yummy. Drink it. I love it. They've been in that offense. Have some more of it. Okay. It's the longest, but I don't think that really means. I don't know what it is about the pushing and the shoving. All right, but we are about to have kickoff in just a little bit, so we got to wrap things up. We've got 2 more divisions. So the NFC West, I've got the San Francisco 49ers winning it. Brock Purdy is a pretty nice quarterback, and I really like the offensive weapons that they have. They even added a couple more in the draft, so be on the lookout for them to compete with them. I like the Rams as well. Stafford, Puka Nacua, and Cooper Kupp are definitely going to have something to say with it. And this will also be year 2 of Kyren Williams as the main running back. So we will see how things go. However, they do sound like they want to even use him in some other strange situations. And then my Super Bowl prediction for this season is going to be, I'm going to be completely biased here and say the Eagles over the Chiefs. I think it's going to be almost a repeat or a rematch of the Super Bowl from a couple years ago. Hopefully the Eagles get their revenge or their avenge on Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. It would be awesome to see the Eagles win a Super Bowl. Maybe I would even go. It is in New Orleans this February. Stay tuned. We've got kickoff in just a few minutes in Kansas City in Arrowhead. We've got the Kansas City Chiefs tonight against the Baltimore Ravens. Pick one. Dell, Rice, Waddle. Waddle all day. That's a silly question, bro. Waddle all day. It doesn't matter if it's PPR or not. Dell's competing for targets, and Rashee Rice I like, but I think that Pat Mahomes is also going to be spreading the ball out, and Kelsey's still that number 1 guy. I'm responding to TikTok comments if people don't know on YouTube, but follow me on YouTube as I go live later tonight. The game is about to start, so I am about to watch, but check me out. Flowers or Metcalf? That's tough. Flowers is about to go on right now. For the sake of making tonight more interesting, I say Flowers. Maybe put Metcalf in your flex or wide receiver too if you have to. Even though Flowers is typically that flex, it's just nice to have that flexibility later on in the week. So put him at your wide receiver 1 for this week. And we've got the national anthem, so Until next time, we'll probably see you maybe in the second half of the game or at the end of the game, but maybe I'll go live for a little bit. But anyway, stay classy, my friends. Go Birds. And yeah, Eagles play the Packers in Brazil tomorrow. Should be pretty exciting. I'll actually be at the link for the party. I don't know, the viewing party for that. But I'll probably make a little thing. Rate my team, please. Herbert, Hall, John Taylor, Evans, Moore, Josh Jacobs, Kittle. It's not too bad. I saw a nicer team earlier in the comments, or a couple nicer teams earlier in the comments. But I do like Herbert as a value quarterback, even though he doesn't really have great wide receivers to throw to this year. Hall's a great pick. Jonathan Taylor's a great pick. It's pretty incredible that you got Breece Hall and Jonathan Taylor. Looks like you went back to back in running backs there. And Mike Evans is definitely a great value pick. Not too crazy about DJ Moore. And Josh Jacobs should be okay in the Green Bay Packers. At least he's not competing with Aaron Jones this year. Love George Kittle, so nothing bad to say about there. But that's going to wrap things up. We'll see you later, and go Birds.